So this is the second video on balancing reactions, and I'm going to take you through a general trick that will help you balance slightly more difficult equations. So I want to let you take a minute here to review the general guidelines on balancing equations. So here's an unbalanced reaction, or a skeleton equation, of sodium hydroxide and copper 2 chloride reacting to produce sodium chloride plus copper 2 hydroxide. Now, here's the first trick. When I go to take inventory of both sides of my equation, I am going to keep my polyatomic ions together. So if you notice, instead of breaking up the oxygen and the hydrogen in hydroxide, I see that hydroxide is the same on both sides. So if you have polyatomic ions that are the same on both sides, you can keep them together, or keep it all together when balancing. Now this makes it tremendously easier. So when I go to take inventory now, on my reactant side I have 1 sodium, on my product side I have 1 sodium. On my reactant side I have 1 hydroxide, on my product side I have 2 hydroxides. On my reactant side I have 1 copper, product side I have 1 copper. On my reactant side I have 2 chlorines, and on my product side I have 1 chlorine. So now I'm going to take a look at what's unbalanced. My hydroxides are unbalanced and my chlorines are unbalanced. So let's start with hydroxide. I have 2 hydroxide on my product side, so I'm going to have to put a 2 in front of sodium hydroxide, so now I have 2 hydroxide on my reactant side. But notice that 2 is also going to distribute to the sodium. So now I have 2 sodiums on my reactant side. So since my sodium's unbalanced now, I'm going to go over to my product side and balance it by adding a 2 in front of my sodium chloride. So I now have 2 sodiums on my product side, but that 2 also distributes to the chlorine, so I also have 2 chlorines. Which, if you notice, I already have 2 chlorines on my reactant side, so my chlorines are now balanced. So I'm going to check my work. I have 2 sodiums, check. I have 2 hydroxides, check. I have 1 copper, check. And 2 chlorines on both sides, check. Your final balanced reaction should look like this. So I have a 2 to 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. Now these 1s are implied, you can write them in, or if you don't write them in, like I said before, they're implied. So your molar ratio, again, is 2 to 1 to 2 to 1.